guys, welcome back to Strong Successful Male. So for today, I'm going to read this very entertaining email I was sent from a subscriber. This is from a guy, he is 48 years old, and he shares his story, his life journey, if you will, from the time he was a kid, troubled childhood, up until when he became obviously a solid adult and married the great gal who became his wife. In this story, he shares the many girlfriends he had along the way who were all very good looking and accordingly matched the whole hot crazy scale, backing up 100% the things that I talk about, many guys talk about, and you know about. You're going to see how, of course, the 9s and 10s typically are nuts, and they aren't relationship material. You keep them for hookups. But also in this story, which again is quite entertaining, he really goes into his life journey as a young boy who had a very tough childhood because his dad really was a piece of garbage, let me put it that way, and how he was essentially raised and taught to be a man by his stepfather, a really good guy who's truly like the best supporting actor in the story, who really helped him become a man, who in many ways R-pilled him, even though he married a single mom. But this guy was a good guy, and it's really, I think, just a story that I think a lot of you guys really appreciate. You know, I guess all guys go through hard times, but it's about perseverance and learning and that type of thing. And by the way, a story like this, a life story, is long. So this is going to be split up into 2 parts. Lots of 2-parters this week. So I'm going to jump right into it, and when I'm done this part 1, I'll then publish part 2 a couple hours later. So he says here, hello SSM. Big fan here. You can call me John. And I want to share my story and the drama I've lived with gals labeled as 10s. I don't even know how the scale works, but I assume if they've got a nice body and a gorgeous face, they're a 10. Pretty much. Now, everybody can be a little different what they determine as an 8, 9, or 10, but generally, very good body, very pretty face. They're close to that. My parents are from Latin America, and let's just start the story with sperm donor, or SD, from now on. I refuse to call him anything else. SD is still handsome to this day. He's retired military, and when I was 5 or 6 years old, he had an accident at HQ that left him in a wheelchair for months. I barely remember that time. Now he walks with a cane. After rehab, he got a promotion and a discharge with small compensation and lifetime retirement. Even with that promotion, he was still low rank, and eventually he picked up an office job to cover the bills. My mom and SD were neighbors and started dating as teenagers. Before they turned 20 years old, my mom got pregnant. SD was crushed, and his family forced him to marry her before I was born at the end of 1977. My mom's religious family wasn't any better. They made her marry him so she wouldn't have a bastard child. Since SD, again SD is his birth father here, only had basic schooling, he joined the army to support us. That meant he was gone most of the time, either deployed or stuck at HQ. Well, obviously, they want to get married, but that's just how things were back then, the pressure and all that, and he was doing what he had to do initially, so I understand that. Well, after his accident and rehab, he was home all the time, but he grew bitter, very bitter. He started beating my mom, blaming her for his bad luck. I remember once standing between them with a broomstick ready to protect her. I was only 8 years old. He laughed at me and said, "You don't understand shit," then walked away still laughing. It's terrible, man. Now, obviously, this is stuff you remember. And a lot of times this is what happens when they can have a father who generally, truly is horrible and abusive. And the boy will oftentimes pick fights with the father to protect the mom and protect the brothers and sisters. You were no different. That's very brave, man. I'm sorry you had to go through that, man. Well, after his accident and rehab, I read that part. When the beatings got worse, my mom asked family for help. They refused, saying that that's the cross you have to bear. We were screwed. SD was the breadwinner, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom with no money. That is fucking horrible. See, guys, there are scumbags out there. Things changed when she ran into an old-school friend, Aunt Sophia, who helped us escape. We lived in a shelter for single moms for a while until Mom found a job. Since she couldn't take care of me while working, I was sent to boarding school. She worked 12-hour shifts to pay for my school, her expenses, and to save for divorce. Every Sunday we spent time together. I could see how exhausted she was, but she never missed a visit. Your mom's a strong lady and doing what she had to do. That's great. I was confused and an angry kid. Always getting into trouble, always fighting. Boarding school was full of orphans, even angrier than me. They hated that I still had a mom who visited me and sent me little treats now and then. At 11 years old, I graduated boarding school. Mom took me home to meet her fiancé, her former boss, a childless widower whose wife had died. I saw him as the enemy. I don't even know why. Maybe because he was a grown man like SD, or maybe because I felt like he was stealing my mom. See right there. This is the point about dating single moms. This is some of the crap you're going to deal with an angry kid, even though it's not your fault. And you can see this kid, what he went through. He was a good kid. It wasn't his fault. But still, he saw any guy as a potential like his dad, or taking away his mom. These are things that you're going to deal with one way or another. My future stepdad helped Mom pay for the attorney, and she finally divorced SD. We met him again. He was apologetic, sweet-talking, saying he wanted a second chance to do things right. That's what guys that are usually alcoholics and abusers and all that usually say. Just like women who are abusers and alcoholics, and that's what they say too. Do they change? No. Mom didn't budge. Then SD dragged in her family. My grandparents came to our tiny apartment to open our eyes, preaching that she had promised God to honor her husband and all that blah, blah, blah. My mom said no firmly, and they disowned her. And when I refused to be a son for SD, they disowned me too. Well, you were a little young, but I'm sure you were thinking, go F yourselves, grandparents. They knew what was going on. And still, nope, you're supposed to be with him because that's what God said to do. No, you don't need those people in your life. Mom encouraged me to have a relationship with SD, but I refused. Honestly, he scared the hell out of me, and deep down, I resented him for hurting her. I don't blame you. It's actually kind of amazing that she actually encouraged you to have a relationship with him. When you have these awful moms discouraging boys to have relationships with their good fathers just because they're petty and spiteful. By that time, I had a medical checkup. It turned out I had lumbar scoliosis. My spine was shaped like an S. Nobody had noticed before. Mom and stepdad immediately paid for my treatment, sacrificing their wedding money for me. They had a small ceremony with stepdad's family, some friends, and Aunt Sophia. Even though our lives got better, I was still angry at stepdad. I did something really stupid. I broke a small sculpture I knew was very important to him. When they found out, I was defiant. My face dropped when my mom handed him a belt and told me that he had every right to discipline me. Well, good for her, because he deserved it. He deliberately broke something that was important to him. He's helping your mom, you little shit. I got such an ass whooping that I never pulled anything like that again. Well, good, you deserved it. And that's the point of ass whoopings, that you learn a lesson. You know how many ass whoopings I got as a kid? I learned. My dad was like Indiana Jones with this fucking belt. Whoosh! This is why I smack everybody, because I got the belt as a kid. And I learned. My butt was so numb, I didn't feel anything after a while. It took me years in therapy, but eventually I recognized him as a father I never had. Thank the Lord. This guy is the patience of a saint with a belt. The year after the wedding, my first sister was born. The next year, my second, and the following year, my third. By then, Mom closed the factory permanently. I think stepdad was hoping for a son, but he got stuck with me. Meanwhile, as part of my scoliosis treatment, I went to swimming lessons 4 times a week and other therapy that lasted years. Eventually, my spine got mostly fixed. Well, that's great, man. I'm glad they identified it early on. I'm 12 to 14 years older than my sisters, and I was their regular babysitter. I didn't mind. I love my cute little sisters, and I've always been their favorite guy. When I was 13 years old, I wanted a pair of perestroika shoes. What the hell is that? And they were popular and expensive. I got mad when stepdad told me no. After I vented, he sat me down and said that I'm responsible for feeding you, educating you, and dressing you. But I'm not a millionaire. If you want shoes, you get the cheap ones. If you want clothes, you get them at the supermarket. But let's make a deal. If you want something expensive, earn half the money yourself, and I'll give you the other half, or are we clear? Okay, that's good of him. I like the fact he's making it abundantly clear. I'm doing what I can to take care of you, but beyond that, you got to work for it. Instilling a work ethic in a young man. He did a hell of a lot for you. And he has 3 daughters to take care of as well. Yes, sir. And that's how I started working at the supermarket. helping customers pack their groceries. We could work 3 hours and earn tips until we were 16 to 17 years old. That's when I learned how much effort money really costs. I used to waste my allowance on useless crap. Not anymore. Since then, I haven't stopped working, earning, and saving for things that I want. See? That's teaching you to be a man. You gotta earn your money. You gotta work for your money. When I was 7 years old, I made the dumbest mistake ever, but I didn't know it was dumb at the time, and I asked my dad for an allowance. And I will not forget that moment as long as I live. And my dad, being born in 1922, I'm of a second family, that's why he was born back then, lived through the 20s, survived the Great Depression, had both his parents die as a teenager, World War II, all that, been through a hell of a long life, looked at me and said, you don't get an allowance, you work for your money. And as always, that never changed. Very important lesson. But mind you, I had a whole house full of fucking Transformers and G.I. Joes and He-Man and Star Wars and GoBots and anything else you could think of, cool toys of the 80s. I could have started my own toy store. Plus, we live in a beautiful house and pool, and I went to a nice school, and went to Disneyland. Who the hell was I to ask for an allowance? But I didn't know any better because all my friends got them. So he started giving me jobs, I earned my money, and there you go. He did you a favor, as did my dad. Anyway, back to the story. At 15 years old, I had my first girlfriend, Karen. I made all the classic blue pill mistakes, calling her every day, spending all my savings on her, giving her too much attention, neglecting my friends and family. I put her on the pedestal. Sounds like my first girlfriend. My first girlfriend, technically, what the hell was her name? Allie. That was my first girlfriend at 15 years old, too. And I did the same shit. And she dumped me. Gee whiz. I wonder why. The first time I messed up, I was late to a date. And she made out with one of my acquaintances, Mark. Yeah, Mark probably didn't do any of that stuff. That night, stepdad heard me crying in my room and came to talk. I told him everything, and he knocked some sense into me. He said to me, you're putting too much effort into the relationship. What is she putting in? Nothing. What do your mom and I always say? That we're a team. Do you see Karen as a teammate? And I said, no, sir. It was like someone ripped off a blind spot. I realized how unfair and entitled she was. See, he's a good guy. Finally, he asked me if she had seen me cry, and I said no. I ran away when I saw her with Mark. He said, good. Never let them see how much she's affected you. It's like bleeding next to a shark. That's the last time another human being ever seen me cry. Good. So I tell you guys, it's okay to have the emotions and cry and everything when you find out the worst possible shit happens. Just don't let them see it. Or you never let an enemy see you bleed. The following week, I ignored Karen and focused on my exams. She tried to talk to me, but I walked away or ignored her. There you go. She was expecting you to chase after her. Then she called me home saying she wanted to give me a second chance. Bitch, no, you're not giving me a second chance. I told her, why don't you give it to Mark? She tried to gaslight me, saying Mark kissed her by force. And I said no, and hung up on her. Stepdad was there. I saw a smile of pride on his face. But something bugged me, so I asked him about second chances, and he said the following. He said, let's say you crashed my car by mistake. That's fine. Accidents happen. Mistakes make us grow. After you reflected and finished your punishment, of course I'd be grounded for crashing his car, I'd give you a second chance to drive the car. But if you deliberately crashed my car just to feel the rush, and then lied to me about saying the car crashed itself, then there's no way I'd ever lend you my car again. Now, what that girl did, was it a mistake, or was it her own free will? He says, I'll just say this, I love stepdad's wisdom. Your stepdad's awesome, man. You are lucky to have him. But you know what? After what you went through and early on with your dad, your biological father, this guy was like an angel sent down from heaven to help you. With some tough love. And a belt when you deserved it. 2 days later, Karen's older brother waited for me outside school and beat me up. The fuck? Boarding school had taught me how to defend myself, but he was 2 years older than me, taller and stronger, so I lost the fight. Still, I punched him several times and messed up his leg pretty bad. Stepdad was proud that I defended myself, and Mom took care of my wounds. Good for you for fighting back. He attacked you. Yeah, you're not going to win. When you're 13 or 15 and someone's 17, the odds are taller, bigger, stronger, more experienced. You stood your ground. Even though you lost, you won. You earn respect for not backing down. Never escalated. In the early 90s, fights outside school was common. And in boarding school, there was the unwritten rule, never snitch, or you'd be labeled a sissy forever. So I never said who I fought with. Yep, we had that code at my school too. The next day, Karen mocked me when she saw my bruised face. I asked her if her brother was still howling, and that shut her up. Man, what a bitch. Major R-pill moment there. Well, thanks to the swimming lessons, I was thin and had good muscle. I even won some competitions. In high school, I joined the basketball team and soccer teams, and we won a few tournaments. At 17 years old, I got my next red pill dose with Jane, my first quote-unquote 10. She was a year older, gorgeous, a cheerleader. I was a big shot at school, athlete, tall, lots of acquaintances, and I'd inherited sperm donor's looks. My grades sucked, but nobody cared. Jane was the one chasing me, holding hands, calling me at home. It was almost Y2K. Cell phones were crazy expensive, so we used local phones. Yeah, I had two different cheerleader girlfriends, and they were hotties, but they were a pain in the ass. And dumb. Now, the first one was fairly intelligent. The second girl, she was dumb. She had the best fucking ass I ever seen. After 2 months of dating, she wanted SEX. 2 months, huh? That's like an eternity in high school. I never brought it up because I'd already met her religious parents. I brought condoms and hid them in my room. I'm sure Mom found them because out of nowhere, Stepdad sat me down and talked to me about SEX. He said the following: if you're going to go do grown-up activities, be prepared for grown-up consequences. The moment you father a child, your life changes. For the next 18 years and 9 months, you'll have a responsibility. Forget parties, forget friends. You'll have to provide for your child. Are we clear? Every page I go through, I'm liking your stepdad more and more. Every fucking kid needs a stepdad like your dad. You might as well just call him your father, for Christ's sake. I was hesitant, but Jane wouldn't take no for an answer. I was a horny teenager. It was my first time, so we did it. She insisted condoms weren't necessary. Oh, hell no. But I pushed her to use them. We never had SEX again, but that was the one time was enough. Hey, you lost your virginity. Rite of passage. There you go. And you said she was hot. You know? I'm sure it wasn't very exciting. I'm sure it lasted a whole 47 seconds, but you lost your virginity, so good for you. I bet you if your stepdad didn't have that conversation, you probably would have worn protection. The next week, she told me she was pregnant. And it was mine. That fast. She was calm, but I completely lost it. I said, but we use protection. She said, it's not 100% effective. And I believed her. How do you know that maybe she wasn't pregnant already, but wanted you to take the blame for this? The same day I told my parents. They looked disappointed. My mom asked if we used protection. I said yes, but it failed. Then I looked at stepdad in the eyes and he said, I'm sorry, I failed you. Then I looked at the floor. I expected him to yell at me or beat me, but he did not. I was not going to beat you, for heaven's sake. He never raised a voice to me or my sisters, not once. He spoke calmly. He said, you know what consequences are. We must arrange a meeting with Jane's family. Then Mom asked a question that saved my life. How long have you two been intimate? I said defeated just once last week. I was staring at the ground and then noticed the silence. I looked up. Both of them were glaring at me, and I got scared. Mom brought me a calendar and told me to mark the exact day Jane and I hooked up. I did, and stepdad said 5 days, that's not possible. I didn't understand. They asked me to babysit my sisters while they went out. 3 hours later, they came back with some guy, let us call him Mike. We all went to Jane's house. Stepdad told me to stay quiet. When we met her parents, they were angry and cold toward me. Well, you can imagine. Mine were calm, cordial, and completely in sync, like a unit. Jane was distant, barely spoke to me. Stepdad did most of the talking. Mom backed him up. Jane's parents were curious about Mike. Stepdad said he had access to the best hospitals for their grandchild and that all bills would be covered. Jane's parents lit up at that. Then stepdad stared at Jane. I knew that glare, predator spotting prey. He said Mike was our lawyer. Mike opened the briefcase, interviewed Jane in front of her parents, and asked if she accepted my parents' help for safe pregnancy. She said yes. Then Mike added, if the hospital informs us you're committing fraud, for example, my client's son isn't the father, you and your family will pay back all fees and maybe face a court date. Jane then went pale. Her parents were shocked, demanding to know what he meant. Jane excused herself and ran to her room, leaving them confused. My parents excused us, and we went home. The next day, Jane's parents called. She confessed that she was already pregnant before we hooked up. That's what I thought. Her father apologized to mine and promised to deal with her. Jane's best friend apologized to me too. She was a good friend. She told me Jane had said that we were in a free love relationship, what people now call an open relationship. According to her, Jane had slept with a chemistry teacher and a security guard at school, both married, one with kids. Holy crap. Yeah, we had a girl that did that. She was one of the hottest girls in my class. It was always hot. Junior high, high school, and everybody knew she was hooking up with one of the teachers who was like 32 years old. And the second we all graduated, when she was 18 and all graduated, they were out and about because he went to my gym. She was at my gym. I'd see them together. According to her, Jane had slept with a chemistry teacher, blah, blah, blah. Jane dropped out, and I never saw her again. Months later, classmates teased me saying my son was born. A couple weeks later, the chemistry teacher was fired. Is that a coincidence? Nope, don't believe in coincidences. Well, as a student, I wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed. I knew college would be a waste of money and time. I didn't even know what to study. I asked my parents to let me work for a year to find my passion. They agreed, but only if I paid rent and utilities. No problem. I was 18, finding jobs was easy, but I only lasted 2 to 3 months in each until I started a repair workshop. He says, SSM, I don't know if you believe in love at first sight. No, because that's when I fell in love with technology. Okay, that's different. I found my passion. Boarding school had taught me discipline, and that helped me make the most of my time. I went to tech school, worked, and still had time for the gym. I started lifting weights, boxing, gaining muscle, and my physique became my pride. I also invested in dressing well and grooming myself. I'm not chatty, but I make good friends at work. Dude, you found your passion, your purpose, and you went forward towards it. That's awesome. And good for you for keeping in shape, hitting the gym, and all that. Wonderful. Years later, 2 friends and I opened an electronics repair business. We fixed TVs, refrigerators, radios, VHS players. VHS, huh? Well, okay, this is the late 90s, so yeah. All kinds of devices. At first, earnings were low, but customers kept on coming. Eventually, it was enough for me to move out of my parents' house. My sisters were sad, but they were growing up, and my parents needed the space. I promised to take them out at least once a month and have sleepovers at my place. I kept that promise until they started dating. You're a good brother. They looked up to you, man. By 24 years old, cell phones were more affordable, and that boosted our business. We had so much work, we hired more people and rented a bigger workshop. Me and my 2 buddies were doing great. Some months later, I moved to a bigger apartment with a spare bedroom for my sisters. Wow, taking care of your family. Your parents are like, hallelujah, the house is ours. That's awesome you started your own business, man. That takes balls. And you're a young guy. Good for you. The work ethic that you learned from your stepdad. My biological father, SD, was a ladies' man. Mom says she's sure he cheated on her several times until his accident. I swore I'd never be like him. Never a cheater, never an abuser. Well, good for you, man. At 25 years old, I met my next waste of time. We will call her Chloe. My buddies and I went to a club where we met her and her 2 friends. They were, wait for it, nurses. Now we know this is going to turn out. Back then, I didn't know about their reputation. Chloe was gorgeous, smart, and in my opinion, a 10. He says, yeah, I was picky back then. We had chemistry. She knew exactly what buttons to press to keep me hooked. Well, what? She was good looking and sleeping with you. Not too hard to figure out. I didn't see it until it was too late. She was clingy, which I liked. My sisters were clingy too. She praised my intelligence. I always felt insecure about not going to university. Praised my body, my business, and she knew how to make me jealous. I thought I was in love. Smack! Dumbass. Chloe had a colleague, Allison. I met her when I went to the hospital looking for Chloe. Allie was a tomboy, a lesbian, but brutally honest and a great friend. She's still one of my closest pals today. Funny thing is, our friendship started off rough. We argued about something stupid, then argued again the next time we met. Somehow it was fun to argue with her. A year later, Chloe wanted to move in with me when her lease expired. And he says, ready to smack? I had the space, so I said yes. Smack! By then, she had me thinking she might be the one. She started moving in a little by little. And that is where I'm going to wrap up part 1. And we're going to get into part 2 in a couple hours, guys. And you're really going to hear, well, the rest of the story of Chloe here and his many adventures with the gals, prove my point about the 9s and 10s, why they are just hookups for fun, nothing more. They can make it crazy, as well as a continuation of our guy's journey here. It's really good. I really appreciate he took the time to write this thing out. I highly encourage you to come back and hear the rest of the story. See you in 2 hours.